Here's something nobody wants to admit. That label you've been wearing your entire life, the one that says, "I'm just shy," is a lie. Not a small lie, not a white lie. A catastrophic, life-limiting, opportunity-destroying lie that's been keeping you small while others who aren't smarter, more talented, or more deserving than you are out there building careers, forming deep connections, and commanding the kind of respect you've only dreamed about. Let me guess. You've watched them. The ones who walk into rooms like they own the place. The ones who effortlessly turn strangers into friends. Who say exactly the right thing at exactly the right moment. Who seem to have been born with some invisible instruction manual for human interaction that you somehow never received. And you've told yourself the same story over and over. They're just naturally good with people. I'm not wired that way. But here's what's actually happening, and this will change everything. Those people aren't gifted. They're trained. They've developed a specific set of learnable capabilities that you've been told were personality traits. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to prove to you that what you call shyness is actually something entirely different. Something you can master, starting today. Because here's the uncomfortable truth that the self-help industry doesn't want you to know. Emotional intelligence isn't about being extroverted. Social skills aren't about being born charismatic. And the ability to read people, influence outcomes, and build powerful relationships has absolutely nothing to do with whether you're shy or not. It's a system, a framework, a set of psychological patterns that can be learned by anyone willing to stop making excuses and start developing competence. This isn't going to be another feel-good audiobook that tells you to just be yourself or embrace your introversion. This is a complete rewiring of how you understand human connection. By the time we're done, you'll know exactly why you've struggled in social situations, how to decode the hidden emotional signals that others broadcast constantly, and most importantly, how to position yourself as someone others naturally gravitate toward, trust, and respect. The question isn't whether you can develop these skills. The question is whether you're ready to stop hiding behind a label and start becoming the person you've always known you could be. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Shyness Myth. Why You've Been Misdiagnosed. We need to talk about the word shy. It's everywhere. Parents use it to explain their child's behavior at social gatherings. Adults use it as a permanent excuse for avoiding networking events, difficult conversations, or leadership opportunities. Therapists use it as a diagnosis. But here's what nobody's telling you. Shyness as a fixed personality trait doesn't actually exist. What exists is a collection of underdeveloped social capabilities wrapped in a neat little package called my personality. And the moment you accept that package as truth, you stop growing. You stop trying. You resign yourself to being the observer instead of the participant, the background character instead of the protagonist in your own life. Think about it like this. Imagine someone who's never learned to swim standing at the edge of a pool, heart racing, palms sweating, completely overwhelmed by the prospect of jumping in. Would you look at that person and say, "Well, you're just naturally afraid of water. That's your personality. Some people are swimmers, some aren't"? Of course not. You'd recognize immediately that their fear stems from lack of competence. They haven't developed the skills that would make them feel safe and capable in water. Social situations work exactly the same way. When you walk into a crowded restaurant and feel your chest tighten, when you stand in a networking circle and go completely blank, when you want to contribute to a meeting, but the words die in your throat, that's not shyness. That's your nervous system screaming, I don't have the tools I need to navigate this successfully. Recent research in behavioral psychology has shattered the old myths about social capability being fixed at birth. What scientists have discovered is that confidence in social environments correlates directly with something called social cognitive competence. This includes your ability to accurately read emotional signals, manage your own emotional responses, and deploy appropriate behavioral strategies based on context and personality type. In other words, the person who seems naturally good with people has simply developed these three core capabilities to a higher level than you have. That's it. Not genetics, not personality, not some mysterious gift from the social gods. Skills, learnable, developable, masterable skills. Here's what actually happens in your brain when you experience what you've been calling shyness. Your amygdala, the ancient part of your brain responsible for threat detection, perceives the social situation as potentially dangerous. Why? Because you don't have reliable, practiced strategies for success. You don't know how to read the room. You don't know how to enter conversations smoothly. You don't know how to handle awkward silences or disagreements or unexpected questions. So your amygdala does what it's designed to do. It triggers a stress response. Cortisol and adrenaline flood your system. Your heart rate increases. Your muscles tense. Your thinking becomes narrow and reactive instead of broad and strategic. And you interpret all of this as evidence that you're just shy, that this is who you are, permanently and unchangeably. But the most socially successful people in the world, the ones you've been envying, understand something crucial. Social discomfort is feedback, not identity. When they feel anxious in a social situation, they don't think, this proves I'm not good with people. They think, what specific skill would make this feel more manageable? What knowledge am I missing that would give me confidence here? Let me give you a different example. Think about learning to drive. Remember the first time you got behind the wheel? The overwhelming amount of information you had to process simultaneously? The mirrors, the pedals, the steering, the other cars, the signs, the speed limit, the turn signals, all of it happening at once while your instructor sat there calmly, like it was the most natural thing in the world? You felt incompetent because you were incompetent. You hadn't yet developed the automatic responses that make driving feel effortless. But here's the key. You didn't conclude that you were just naturally bad at driving and give up. You practiced. You developed muscle memory. You learned to anticipate situations. And eventually, driving became so automatic that you could do it while having conversations, listening to podcasts, or planning your day. Social interaction follows the exact same learning curve. The only difference is that our culture treats social ability like a mysterious gift rather than a developable skill. Schools teach mathematics, literature, and science, but they don't teach how to read micro-expressions, how to calibrate emotional responses, how to build rapport strategically, or how to navigate group dynamics effectively. This educational gap creates a devastating assumption. If you haven't naturally developed social skills by adulthood, you never will. So people resign themselves. They become the quiet one, the observer, the person who watches life happen rather than actively shaping it. But this resignation is based on completely false information. Every single social capability can be learned. Reading body language? Learnable. Managing emotional states? Learnable. Building genuine rapport? Learnable. Influencing others ethically? Learnable. Commanding respect? Learnable. These aren't personality traits locked in by your DNA. They're competencies that respond to deliberate practice and strategic development. The most important shift you can make right now is moving from I am shy to I am developing social competencies. This isn't just semantic. It's a complete reframing of your relationship with social capability. One statement is a fixed identity. The other is a growth trajectory. When you identify as shy, you make excuses. You avoid challenging situations. You accept limitation as permanent. But when you identify as someone developing competencies, you start making progress. You seek out practice opportunities. You study what works. You treat social situations as laboratories for growth rather than tests of worth. The people you admire socially weren't born different from you. They simply learned different skills at different times, often through necessity, observation, or intentional study. And if they can learn them, so can you. The question isn't about capability. It's about commitment. Are you ready to stop hiding behind a label and start building competence? Chapter 2. Decoding the Emotional Landscape. Reading what others won't say. Most people stumble through social interactions like they're walking through a dark room, bumping into furniture, missing obvious obstacles, wondering why everything feels so difficult. They hear the words people say and completely miss the symphony of emotional information being broadcast through every other channel. Human beings communicate on at least 5 levels simultaneously, and most people only perceive one of them. There's the verbal content, the actual words being spoken. But underneath that surface level, there's vocal tonality, facial expressions, body positioning, energy levels, and unstated psychological needs. When you learn to read all 5 levels simultaneously, it's like suddenly having access to information that makes everyone else seem transparent. Think about the last time someone told you they were fine, but something felt off. Their words said one thing, but everything else, the tension in their shoulders, the tightness around their mouth, the slight edge in their voice, screamed something entirely different. You probably noticed that something was wrong, but you didn't know how to name it or address it. So you accepted the verbal statement and moved on, missing an opportunity for genuine connection. This is where emotional intelligence separates the amateurs from the masters. Amateurs take words at face value. Masters read the complete emotional landscape and respond to what's actually happening, not just what's being said. Let me introduce you to a framework that will transform how you perceive human interaction. It's based on research by emotion scientists who've spent decades studying how humans broadcast internal states through involuntary signals. But instead of giving you academic jargon, I'm going to give you practical applications you can use immediately. Facial expressions represent your richest source of emotional data. The human face contains over 40 muscles dedicated solely to creating expressions, and most of these muscles respond automatically to internal emotional states. People can control their words fairly easily, but controlling every facial muscle simultaneously requires enormous conscious effort that most people can't sustain. There are 6 core emotional expressions that appear universally across all human cultures: joy, sadness, anger, fear, disgust, and surprise. But these basic categories only scratch the surface. Within each expression exists a spectrum of subtle variations that reveal far more detailed information about what someone is actually experiencing. Real joy, for example, engages both the mouth and the eye muscles simultaneously. The corners of the mouth turn upward while the muscles around the eyes contract, creating what researchers call crow's feet wrinkles at the outer corners. This is genuine happiness, the kind that emerges from authentic positive emotion. But social joy, the kind people perform to be polite, only engages the mouth muscles. The smile is there, but the eyes remain unchanged, almost dead. Once you learn to distinguish between these two types of smiles, you'll never again mistake polite tolerance for genuine enthusiasm. You'll know exactly when someone is truly delighted versus when they're just being socially appropriate. Anger manifests in multiple forms, each requiring completely different responses. Flash anger appears as brief muscle tension, a momentary tightening of the jaw, a quick compression of the lips, a fleeting narrowing of the eyes. This indicates temporary irritation that can often be addressed through simple acknowledgement or minor adjustment. Sustained anger shows up as prolonged tension, particularly in the jaw and around the eyes. The person maintains a controlled expression, but you can see the muscle activation just beneath the surface. This type of anger won't disappear with a quick apology or subject change. It requires direct address of the underlying issue. Then there's cold anger, the most dangerous form. This appears as deliberately controlled facial tension combined with steady, unblinking eye contact and minimal expression variation. This is calculated displeasure. The person has moved past reactive emotion into strategic response. If you encounter cold anger and try to smooth it over with charm or deflection, you'll only make things worse. This requires genuine acknowledgement of the problem and concrete steps toward resolution. Fear expressions vary based on their source. Social fear, the kind triggered by performance pressure or evaluation, appears as reduced eye contact, slightly raised eyebrows, and tension around the mouth. The person is trying to make themselves smaller, less visible, less vulnerable to judgment. Physical fear looks entirely different. The eyes widen dramatically, the eyebrows raise higher, and the mouth often opens slightly. This is the ancient mammalian response to immediate threat, and it triggers completely different neurological pathways than social fear. Understanding which type of fear someone is experiencing allows you to provide appropriate support. Social fear needs reassurance and reduced pressure. Physical fear needs safety and escape routes. Responding with the wrong type of support, treating social fear like physical danger, or dismissing physical fear as mere nervousness creates disconnection instead of comfort. Disgust shows up as a wrinkled nose, raised upper lip, or lowered eyebrows. But here's what most people miss. Disgust doesn't only relate to physical substances like rotten food or unpleasant smells. People display disgust micro-expressions when they encounter ideas, proposals, or behaviors they find morally or intellectually repugnant. Watch for this during presentations or negotiations. If you're pitching an idea and you see a fleeting disgust expression cross someone's face, they're not just disagreeing with you, they're finding your proposal fundamentally objectionable on some level. If you continue without addressing that underlying objection, you'll never get their genuine buy-in, even if they eventually say yes. Surprise manifests as raised eyebrows, widened eyes, and sometimes a dropped jaw. But the crucial information lies in what happens immediately after the surprise. If the surprise expression quickly transitions to a smile, the unexpected information was positive. If it shifts to fear or anger, the surprise was unwelcome. The initial surprise itself is neutral. It's the emotional reaction that follows that tells you how the person has interpreted the surprising information. Now let's talk about vocal tonality, which carries emotional information that often contradicts verbal content. A person might use confident words, "I'm totally prepared for this presentation," while their voice wavers with uncertainty. The words say confidence. The tone says doubt. Which one should you believe? Always trust the tone over the words. Vocal patterns are harder to control consciously than word choice, which means they leak authentic emotional states more reliably. Stress appears in higher pitch, faster pace, and audible tension in the vocal cords. Confidence manifests as lower pitch, measured pace, and clear, relaxed articulation. When someone's tone contradicts their words, you're witnessing the gap between what they want to project and what they're actually feeling. Body language operates as a real-time emotional barometer, constantly updating throughout interactions. But here's where most people go wrong. They read individual gestures as if each one has a fixed meaning. Crossed arms mean defensiveness, right? Not necessarily. Crossed arms might indicate cold, comfortable positioning or simply habitual posture. The key is reading clusters of signals rather than isolated gestures. Defensiveness combines crossed arms with backward lean, minimal eye contact, closed facial expressions, and reduced verbal engagement. When you see all of these signals together, you can reliably conclude that the person is feeling protective or resistant. But if someone crosses their arms while leaning forward, maintaining steady eye contact, and actively engaging in conversation, they're not defensive. They're just comfortable or cold. Energy levels provide crucial information about engagement and receptivity. High energy indicates openness to new information, willingness to engage actively, and capacity for processing complex ideas. Low energy might signal fatigue, disinterest, emotional overwhelm, or cognitive saturation. Matching your communication style to someone's current energy level dramatically improves connection and influence. If you're trying to pitch a complex idea to someone showing low energy signals, slumped posture, minimal responses, glazed eyes, you're wasting your time. They don't have the cognitive resources available to process what you're saying. Better to schedule a different time or find a way to restore their energy before proceeding. Finally, let's discuss unstated needs. The psychological drivers that motivate most human behavior but rarely get expressed directly. The person who keeps interrupting others might seem rude, but their underlying need is often for recognition or significance. The person who asks endless questions might appear indecisive, but their core need is usually for security and risk reduction. When you learn to identify and address these unstated needs, you solve problems that others don't even recognize exist. The chronic interrupter doesn't need to be told to stop interrupting. They need to feel heard and valued. Give them that, and the interrupting behavior often disappears naturally. The key to mastering emotional reading is understanding baseline behavior. Everyone has natural patterns of expression, movement, and tone that represent their normal state. What matters isn't the absolute level of any signal. It's the deviation from that person's baseline. A naturally expressive person might display what looks like anger when they're only mildly annoyed. A naturally reserved person might look completely calm while experiencing intense internal distress. You can't know which is which without establishing baseline first. This is why reading strangers accurately is so difficult. You don't have baseline data, but with people you interact with regularly, you can develop extraordinary accuracy by simply paying attention to their normal patterns and noticing when something shifts. Start practicing this today. Choose one person you interact with regularly, a colleague, friend, or family member. Spend the next week observing their emotional patterns without trying to do anything with the information. Just notice. How do their facial expressions change when discussing different topics? What does their body language look like when they're relaxed versus stressed? How does their voice sound when they're genuinely enthusiastic versus politely interested? This observational practice will train your pattern recognition systems and make you far more accurate at reading emotional landscapes. And once you can read what's actually happening beneath the surface level, you can respond in ways that create genuine connection instead of missing each other completely. Chapter 3. The Architecture of Influence. How Strategic Minds Shape Social Dynamics. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. Do you approach social interactions hoping for good outcomes, or do you engineer them? Most people hope. They walk into conversations, meetings, or networking events with vague desires for things to go well, but zero systematic approach for making that happen. They rely on charm, luck, or personality, basically crossing their fingers that things work out. And then they wonder why their results are so inconsistent. Strategic thinkers operate from an entirely different framework. They recognize that human behavior follows predictable psychological patterns, and that influence can be created through deliberate application of specific principles. They don't hope for positive outcomes. They architect them. Let me introduce you to the 6 core principles that govern human influence. These aren't manipulative tricks. They're psychological realities about how humans make decisions and form commitments. Understanding them doesn't make you manipulative, it makes you effective. Principle 1. Reciprocity. Humans are hardwired for reciprocal exchange. When someone provides value to you, you experience psychological pressure to provide value in return. This isn't cultural, it's evolutionary. Reciprocity is how early human communities maintained cooperation and prevented exploitation. Strategic thinkers provide value first, creating natural opportunities for positive reciprocal responses. But here's what most people miss. Value can be delivered in multiple forms, and different people need different types of value. Some people need emotional support, someone who listens without judgment and validates their experience. Others need useful information that helps them solve problems or make better decisions. Some need social connection and introduction to valuable contacts. Others need problem-solving assistance with specific challenges. The key is diagnosing what type of value each person needs most and delivering it authentically. When you consistently provide the right type of value, people naturally want to reciprocate. They return your calls. They support your initiatives. They think of you first when opportunities arise. But reciprocity only works when the value exchange feels genuine. If people sense you're only helping them to create obligation, the psychological effect reverses. Instead of feeling grateful, they feel manipulated. The value must be real, appropriate, and delivered without obvious strings attached. Principle 2. Social proof. Humans look to others, especially similar others, to determine appropriate behavior and attitudes. This is why testimonials work, why celebrity endorsements influence purchasing, why everyone's doing it actually matters in decision-making. We're social creatures who evolved in tribal contexts where conforming to group behavior often meant survival. That evolutionary pressure created psychological mechanisms that automatically assign higher credibility to popular choices and widely held beliefs. Strategic influencers build social proof systematically. They collect testimonials from respected figures. They share success stories from people similar to their target audience. They reference credible authorities who support their positions. They position themselves within groups and communities that enhance their credibility through association. Here's a powerful application. When you're trying to influence someone's decision, don't just present logical arguments. Show them that people they respect have already made similar choices. Find examples of individuals they identify with who have successfully implemented what you're proposing. The objection, "but nobody else is doing this," carries enormous psychological weight because it contradicts social proof. But here are 5 companies similar to yours who've implemented this successfully. Removes that barrier immediately. Principle 3. Commitment and consistency. Humans have a deep psychological need to appear consistent with their previous decisions and stated beliefs. Once someone makes a commitment, especially a public commitment, they experience internal pressure to follow through. This explains why asking for agreement on small points before presenting larger requests dramatically increases success rates. Each small yes creates psychological momentum toward the next, larger yes. It also explains why helping people articulate their own reasons for a decision creates stronger commitment than providing external reasons. When someone says, "I think this approach makes sense because X, Y, and Z," they've created internal justification that they'll feel pressure to honor. Strategic influencers use this principle by creating progressive commitment pathways. They don't ask for major decisions immediately. They start with small commitments that feel easy and natural, then build toward larger requests that become psychologically consistent with what the person has already agreed to. Principle 4. Authority. Humans defer to expertise and legitimate power structures. We've evolved to recognize and respect authority because doing so often provided survival advantages. The person with more experience, knowledge, or designated power typically made better decisions in life or death situations. But authority must be established before it can be leveraged. You can't just declare yourself an authority and expect people to defer to your judgment. You have to demonstrate competence consistently over time. The most powerful form of authority is expertise authority, being genuinely more knowledgeable about relevant topics than the people you're trying to influence. This requires continuous learning, staying ahead of trends, and consistently providing insights that prove valuable. Strategic thinkers build authority through demonstrating competence, sharing credentials appropriately, and consistently knowing more than others about topics that matter. They become the person others turn to for information and guidance. Principle 5. Liking people prefer to say yes to individuals they know, like, and respect. But strategic liking isn't about being superficially charming. It's built through finding genuine commonalities, providing sincere acknowledgement, and working toward shared goals. The most effective way to increase liking is through collaborative problem solving. When you work with someone to overcome a challenge they care about, you create shared investment and mutual respect that transcends surface-level social interaction. Research shows that people who successfully collaborate on meaningful projects develop genuine affinity that persists far beyond the project itself. The shared struggle creates bonds that small talk never could. Principle 6. Scarcity. Humans place higher value on opportunities that appear limited or exclusive. We want what's scarce because our evolutionary history taught us that valuable resources were usually limited. But scarcity must be authentic to be ethical and effective. Creating false scarcity, pretending something is limited when it's not, damages trust and reputation when people discover the deception. Strategic thinkers create genuine scarcity through limited availability, exclusive access, or time-sensitive opportunities. This opportunity is only available to the first 10 people works because it's true, not because it's manipulative. Understanding these 6 principles allows you to structure interactions for optimal outcomes. Instead of hoping people respond positively, you create conditions that make positive responses more likely. Instead of leaving influence to chance, you apply systematic approaches that produce consistent results. But here's the crucial ethical boundary. These principles should be used to create mutual benefit, not to manipulate or exploit others. The goal is facilitating positive outcomes that serve everyone involved, not gaining advantage at others' expense. When you approach influence strategically while maintaining ethical boundaries, you become someone others naturally want to connect with and support. You provide value consistently, build genuine relationships, and create win-win outcomes that strengthen your social position over time. This isn't about becoming manipulative. It's about becoming effective in a way that benefits everyone involved. Chapter 4. Emotional Regulation Mastery. Controlling your internal state for external success. Here's something most people don't realize. Your emotional state in any given moment determines your social effectiveness more than your knowledge, experience, or preparation combined. You could have the perfect script, the ideal strategy, and all the right information. But if you're anxious, reactive, or emotionally overwhelmed when you actually execute, everything falls apart. Your voice tightens. Your thinking narrows. Your body language broadcasts discomfort. And people respond to your emotional state far more than your words. Think about the last time you entered an important conversation while feeling stressed or defensive. How did it go? Probably not great. You likely said things you regretted, missed obvious social cues, or created unnecessary conflict because you were operating from a dysregulated emotional state. Now think about a time when you felt calm, centered, and emotionally balanced before an important interaction. Different outcome, right? When you're emotionally regulated, you think more clearly, communicate more effectively, and influence others more powerfully. This isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending to feel things you don't. It's about developing the capacity to recognize emotional states as they arise, understand what triggered them, and consciously choose how to respond rather than reacting automatically. Most people treat emotions like weather, things that happen to them that they have no control over. I'm just an anxious person. I can't help getting defensive when criticized. I'm naturally reactive. But emotional regulation research shows that this passive relationship with emotions is completely unnecessary. Your emotions are responses to your interpretations of events, and those interpretations are changeable through conscious effort. Level 1. Emotional awareness. The foundation of emotional regulation is being able to identify exactly what you're feeling in real time. This sounds simple, but most people experience emotions without clearly naming them. They feel bad, but don't distinguish between disappointment, frustration, sadness, anxiety, or anger. Each of these emotions provides different information and requires different responses, so accurate identification is crucial. Developing emotional awareness requires creating space between emotional triggers and emotional reactions. When you notice an emotional shift beginning, pause and ask yourself 3 questions. What exactly am I feeling right now? What specific event or thought triggered this emotion? What is this emotion telling me about my needs or values? This simple practice, taking even 30 seconds to name and examine your emotional experience, dramatically improves your capacity for conscious response instead of automatic reaction. Level 2. Understanding emotional triggers. Certain situations, people, or topics predictably generate strong emotional responses. Maybe criticism makes you immediately defensive. Maybe conflict triggers anxiety. Maybe being ignored activates anger. Maybe uncertainty creates overwhelm. Mapping your emotional triggers allows you to prepare for challenging situations in advance. When you know that presenting to senior leadership typically makes you anxious, you can practice specific anxiety management techniques before the meeting. When you know that your colleague's communication style tends to irritate you, you can consciously adjust your interpretation before reacting. Most emotional triggers relate to core psychological needs. The need for respect, security, autonomy, recognition, or competence. When someone threatens one of these needs, even unintentionally, you experience an automatic defensive reaction. Understanding which needs are most sensitive for you allows you to distinguish between actual threats and perceived threats. Often, what feels like an attack is actually just someone operating from their own needs and patterns without any intention to threaten yours. Level 3. Emotional reframing. This is where emotional regulation becomes truly powerful. Reframing involves consciously choosing how you interpret emotional triggers instead of accepting your automatic interpretation. When someone criticizes your work, you can interpret this as an attack on your competence and become defensive, or you can reframe it as information for improvement and respond with curiosity. Same event, completely different emotional response based on interpretation. When someone challenges your idea in a meeting, you can interpret this as disrespect and feel angry, or you can reframe it as engagement. They care enough about the topic to think critically about it and respond with appreciation for their input. Reframing doesn't mean denying or suppressing legitimate emotional responses. It means recognizing that you have choice in how you interpret situations, and some interpretations serve your goals better than others. Level 4. Physiological regulation. Emotions create physical changes in your body. Increased heart rate, muscle tension, shallow breathing, stress hormone release. Learning to manage these physical responses gives you greater control over emotional experiences. The most accessible tool for physiological regulation is breathing. When you breathe deeply and slowly, you activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which naturally calms emotional arousal. Try this right now. Inhale slowly through your nose for 5 counts. Hold for 3 counts. Exhale slowly through your mouth for 7 counts. Repeat 3 times. Notice how your body feels different after just 3 cycles. Your heart rate has decreased. Your muscles have released some tension. Your thinking has become slightly clearer. This isn't magic. It's biology. Slow, deep breathing sends signals to your brain that you're safe, which reduces the stress response that fuels emotional reactivity. Progressive muscle relaxation provides another powerful physiological regulation tool. Starting with your feet and moving upward, deliberately tense each muscle group for 5 seconds, then release completely. This process interrupts the physical component of emotional stress and creates space for conscious choice. Level 5. Strategic emotional expression. Once you can regulate your internal emotional state, you can choose how much and which aspects of your emotions to share with others. This is crucial for social effectiveness. Sometimes expressing vulnerability builds connection. Sometimes maintaining composure demonstrates leadership. Sometimes showing appropriate passion inspires others. The key is matching your emotional display to your social objectives. In a negotiation, controlled intensity might be more effective than explosive anger. In a supportive conversation, gentle warmth might be more helpful than enthusiastic excitement. In a leadership situation, calm confidence might inspire more trust than visible stress. Strategic expression doesn't mean being fake. It means being intentional about which authentic emotions you amplify and which you manage privately. When you master these 5 levels of emotional regulation, you transform from someone whose effectiveness depends on feeling good to someone who can perform excellently regardless of emotional state. You become the person others turn to during crises because they know you'll remain stable. You become more persuasive because your communications aren't clouded by reactivity. You become a better leader because you can inspire confidence through your own emotional stability. This is the difference between hoping you'll feel confident and knowing you can create confidence through deliberate practice. Chapter 5. Building Authentic Rapport. The Psychology of Deep Connection. Let's talk about something most people get completely wrong. Rapport. You've probably been taught that rapport is about mirroring body language, finding common interests, or offering compliments. And sure, those techniques can create temporary surface-level connection. But they don't build the kind of deep rapport that transforms relationships and creates lasting influence. Real rapport, the kind that makes people trust you with their vulnerabilities, support your initiatives without hesitation, and think of you first when opportunities arise, comes from something entirely different. It emerges from genuine understanding, shared experiences, and mutual respect. It develops when people feel truly seen, heard, and valued for who they actually are, not for who they're pretending to be. And here's the beautiful irony. Building authentic rapport is actually simpler than performing all those surface-level techniques. It just requires something most people are unwilling to give: complete presence. The foundation: radical presence. Think about the last time someone gave you their undivided attention, not just physically present while mentally elsewhere, but genuinely, completely focused on you and what you were saying. How did that feel? Rare, right? Maybe even shocking? We live in an age of fractured attention. People scroll through phones during conversations. They plan their next response while you're still talking. They nod along while their minds are somewhere else entirely. This constant partial attention has become so normalized that genuine presence feels almost radical. But when you give someone complete, undistracted attention, you communicate respect, interest, and importance more powerfully than any words could. You send a message. Right now, in this moment, you matter more than anything else demanding my attention. Developing presence requires fighting against every modern "others are talking." Resist the urge to "others are talking." Resist the urge to multitask. When your mind wanders, gently redirect it back to the person in front of you. This is harder than it sounds. Your brain will want to drift. You'll think of something you need to remember. You'll hear something that triggers a tangential thought. Notice when this happens and make the conscious choice to return your full attention to the present conversation. Active listening, beyond just hearing words. Most people think they're good listeners because they let others talk without interrupting. But real listening, the kind that builds deep rapport, goes far beyond simply staying quiet. Active listening means understanding not just what someone is saying, but how they're experiencing their situation. It involves asking clarifying questions, reflecting back key points, and exploring topics that matter to the other person with genuine curiosity. Here's a framework that transforms ordinary listening into rapport-building mastery. When someone shares something with you, resist the urge to immediately relate it to your own experience, offer solutions, or change the subject. Instead, ask questions that help them explore their experience more deeply. What was that like for you? How did you feel when that happened? What matters most to you about this situation? What would an ideal outcome look like from your perspective? These questions accomplish something crucial. They demonstrate that you're more interested in understanding their experience than in sharing your own perspective. And people can feel that difference viscerally. The most powerful form of active listening is empathic listening, where you try to understand not just what someone is saying, but how they're experiencing their situation emotionally. When someone shares a challenge, don't immediately jump to solutions. First, seek to understand their emotional experience. How do they feel about what's happening? What aspects concern them most? What outcomes would provide relief or satisfaction? What's the real impact on their life beyond the surface level problem? When you demonstrate genuine understanding of someone's emotional experience before offering any input of your own, you create a foundation of trust that makes all subsequent communication more effective. Vulnerability, the courage to be real. Here's something that might surprise you. Strategic vulnerability is one of the most powerful rapport-building tools available. When you share something genuine about yourself, especially something that reveals challenge, growth, or uncertainty, you create permission for others to be authentic as well. Most people think they need to project confidence and capability at all times. They hide their struggles, minimize their challenges, and present a carefully curated version of themselves that shows only strength. And in doing so, they create distance instead of connection. Because here's what happens when you're always perfect. People can't relate to you. They might admire you, but they won't feel close to you. Connection happens in the spaces where we recognize our shared humanity, which includes struggle, uncertainty, and imperfection. Strategic vulnerability involves sharing personal information that's relevant to the relationship and appropriate for the context. In professional relationships, you might share challenges you've overcome in your career or lessons you've learned from mistakes. In personal relationships, you might reveal fears, hopes, or meaningful experiences that shaped your perspective. The key word is strategic. This isn't about oversharing inappropriate details or using emotional confession to manipulate sympathy. It's about being willing to let people see the real you, including the parts that aren't perfect. When you share something genuine, you invite reciprocal authenticity. The other person feels safer revealing their own challenges and uncertainties. And in that mutual authenticity, real rapport is born. Value alignment. Connecting at the deepest level surface commonalities. You both like hiking. You went to similar universities. You enjoy the same TV shows. Can create initial connection. But deep rapport comes from discovering alignment at the level of core values. When you find that someone shares your commitment to growth, integrity, service, creativity, or family, you feel understood at a level that transcends shared hobbies. That person becomes naturally attractive as a relationship partner because you recognize fundamental compatibility in what matters most. Identifying value alignment requires asking questions that reveal what drives people at their core. What motivates you to work as hard as you do? What types of behavior in others frustrate you most? What accomplishments make you feel most proud? If you could change one thing about the world, what would it be? What do you want people to remember about you? These questions bypass surface-level small talk and invite people to share what they genuinely care about. And when you discover shared values, acknowledge that alignment explicitly. I really respect that about you. That's something I value deeply as well. Shared experiences, creating common ground. There's something almost magical about going through meaningful experiences with another person. Whether it's overcoming a challenge together, working toward a common goal, or even just experiencing something novel side by side, shared experiences create bonds that extend far beyond the immediate situation. This is why team-building activities actually work when done well. Why collaborative projects create lasting relationships. Why supporting each other through difficulties forges deep connection. The shared experience becomes a reference point that anchors the relationship. Strategic. Rapport builders actively create shared experiences rather than waiting for them to happen accidentally. This doesn't require elaborate planning. Even simple activities can build significant rapport when done together with full engagement. Learning something new together, working on a project with shared investment, helping each other overcome challenges, exploring unfamiliar territory, supporting each other through difficult periods. All of these create common ground that strengthens connection over time. Becoming a champion for others' growth. The highest level of rapport building is helping others become their best selves. When you consistently encourage someone's growth, celebrate their successes, and support them through challenges, you become associated with their positive self-development. This creates loyalty and connection that extends far beyond immediate circumstances. Supporting others' development requires understanding their goals, recognizing their progress, and providing resources or encouragement that help them advance. Sometimes this means offering advice or connections. Sometimes it means providing encouragement during difficult periods. Sometimes it means simply believing in their potential when they struggle to believe in themselves. Here's what this looks like in practice. Notice what someone is trying to achieve. Acknowledge progress they might not even recognize themselves. Share resources that might help them advance. Introduce them to people who could support their goals. Celebrate their wins genuinely. Remind them of their capabilities when they doubt themselves. When you become known as someone who actively supports others' growth and success, you create a network of people who are genuinely invested in your success as well. Not because of obligation, but because you've demonstrated genuine care for their well-being. Authentic rapport cannot be faked or forced, but it can be cultivated through genuine interest in others, consistent supportive behavior, and willingness to be authentic yourself. When you approach relationship building with sincere desire to understand and support others, rapport develops naturally as a byproduct of genuine care and respect. The question isn't whether you can build rapport. It's whether you're willing to show up fully, listen deeply, be real, and genuinely invest in others' well-being. When you do those things consistently, deep connection is inevitable. Chapter 6. Social Hierarchy. Navigation, Reading, and Influencing Power. Dynamics. Every room you walk into has an invisible structure that determines who gets heard, who gets respected, and whose ideas actually get implemented. Most people remain completely unconscious of these power dynamics, wondering why their brilliant suggestions get ignored while someone else's mediocre ideas get embraced enthusiastically. Understanding social hierarchy isn't about becoming political or manipulative. It's about recognizing reality clearly enough to operate effectively within it. When you can accurately assess power dynamics, you can position yourself strategically, communicate more effectively, and achieve better outcomes for everyone involved. Here's what most people miss. Formal authority and actual influence often don't align. The person with the impressive title might not be the most influential person in the room. The quietest person might hold the most respect. The newest team member might have the most expertise in crucial areas. Identifying true influence requires observing behavioral patterns rather than relying on organizational charts or assumptions. Reading The Invisible Hierarchy. Start by watching who speaks first in group discussions. The person who initiates conversation often holds significant social capital in the group. Notice who others wait to hear from before forming their own opinions. That person's perspective carries weight that shapes the entire discussion. Pay attention to interruption patterns. Who gets interrupted frequently? Who never gets interrupted? The person whose sentences are consistently allowed to finish holds higher status than the person who gets talked over regularly. Observe whose ideas get immediately developed versus whose suggestions get acknowledged politely and then ignored. When someone proposes something and others immediately start building on it, asking questions about implementation or expressing enthusiasm, that person has influence. When ideas get met with "that's interesting," followed by silence or subject changes, that person lacks social capital in this particular context. Watch decision implementation patterns. Whose suggestions get acted upon without debate? Whose recommendations require extensive justification and still might not get followed? The gap between these two experiences reveals hierarchical positioning more accurately than any org chart. Body language of status. High-status individuals typically display more relaxed postures, take up more physical space, and make direct eye contact while speaking. Their gestures tend to be open and expansive. Their movements appear calm and controlled rather than nervous or hurried. Lower-status individuals often display more closed postures, minimize their physical presence, and avoid sustained eye contact. They might fidget more, speak more quickly, or use more verbal hedging. Kind of, sort of, maybe. But here's the crucial nuance. Status displays are contextual and situational. The CEO who displays complete confidence in business meetings might become deferential when discussing parenting with their own mother. The junior analyst who appears subordinate in executive meetings might command complete authority when presenting technical analysis in their area of expertise. Understanding this contextual nature of status allows you to read situations more accurately and adjust your own positioning strategically. Vocal patterns of influence. Listen for pitch, pace, and conviction. Higher status individuals typically speak with slightly lower pitch, slower pace, and longer pauses between thoughts. They use declarative statements more often than questions. They rarely uptalk, raising pitch at the end of statements, or seek verbal validation. Lower status individuals often speak faster, use higher pitch, and frequently seek confirmation through tag questions. Don't you think? Right? Does that make sense? These patterns communicate uncertainty and deference even when the content is solid. Strategic status elevation. Here's the good news. Status isn't permanent or fixed. It's fluid and situational, which means you can raise your status appropriately through deliberate action. But you can't simply decide to be higher status and expect others to recognize it immediately. Status elevation comes through demonstrating value consistently over time. You prove competence. You provide unique insights. You solve problems others can't solve. You consistently deliver on commitments. The most effective approach is becoming genuinely valuable to the group or organization. When you consistently contribute ideas that work, solve problems that matter, and help others succeed, your status rises naturally. People begin deferring to your judgment because experience has taught them that your judgment is usually sound. Speaking with appropriate authority. In contexts where your expertise is relevant, speak with confidence and conviction. Make declarative statements rather than tentative suggestions. This approach will solve the problem because X, Y, Z carries more weight than maybe we could possibly consider trying this approach if everyone thinks it might work. But, and this is crucial, in contexts where you lack knowledge, ask intelligent questions that demonstrate engagement without pretending competence you don't possess. Can you help me understand the reasoning behind that approach? Positions you as someone willing to learn rather than someone pretending to know everything. Alliance structures and political navigation. Most groups contain informal coalitions, subgroups that support different agendas and perspectives. Understanding these alliances helps you recognize why certain ideas get supported or opposed, regardless of their merit. Building strategic alliances doesn't mean becoming political in a negative sense. It means being genuinely helpful, reliable, and supportive of people whose goals align with yours. When influential people trust you and know you're competent, they naturally include you in important decisions and advocate for your interests. The currency of social capital. Think of social capital like a bank account. Every time you help someone, deliver on a promise, or solve a problem, you make deposits. Every time you ask for favors, challenge someone's ideas, or require others to accommodate your needs, you make withdrawals. If you make too many withdrawals without sufficient deposits, people become less responsive to your requests. Your influence diminishes because you've depleted your account. The solution is simple. Make more deposits than withdrawals. Be the person who helps others succeed more often than you ask for help. Solve more problems than you create. Add more value than you consume. Elevating others strategically. Here's a counterintuitive insight. One of the most powerful ways to raise your own status is by elevating others. When you help people succeed, solve their problems, and make them look good, they become invested in your success. This approach builds genuine loyalty and creates mutually beneficial relationships that strengthen over time. Instead of climbing over others to gain status, you create a network of people who actively want to support your advancement because you've supported theirs. When to challenge hierarchy. Understanding hierarchy doesn't mean blindly accepting it. Sometimes hierarchical resistance is necessary when decisions are genuinely harmful, when expertise is being ignored, or when power is being abused. But challenging hierarchy effectively requires recognizing the resistance you'll face and planning accordingly. If your proposal threatens someone's status or power, they will oppose it regardless of its merit. In these situations, you need strategies that allow people to save face while supporting necessary changes. Frame your challenge as being in service of shared goals. Provide evidence that supports your position. Build coalition support before making the challenge public. And whenever possible, find ways for others to participate in the solution, so they feel ownership rather than defeat. The goal of hierarchy navigation isn't dominating others or climbing ruthlessly toward power. It's understanding social reality clearly enough to operate effectively within it. When you can read power dynamics accurately and position yourself appropriately, you become someone others naturally turn to for leadership, advice, and collaboration. Chapter 7. Conversational Mastery. The Strategic Art of Verbal Influence. Let me tell you what separates forgettable conversations from unforgettable ones. Most people treat dialogue like a tennis match, waiting for their turn to hit the ball back. But master conversationalists treat it like jazz, listening for the rhythm, responding to the melody, creating something beautiful together. Conversation is the primary vehicle for social connection, influence, and relationship building. Yet most people approach it without any systematic understanding of how it actually works. They hope for engaging exchanges rather than engineering them. They react to conversational dynamics instead of strategically guiding them. Understanding that conversation operates on multiple levels simultaneously changes everything. There's the content level, the actual information being exchanged, the emotional level, the feelings being generated and shared, the relationship level, how the interaction affects connection between participants, and the influence level, how the conversation shapes attitudes, decisions, and future behavior. Strategic conversationalists operate effectively on all these levels at once. They provide valuable content while managing emotions, strengthening relationships, and creating positive influence. The art of powerful questions. Most people ask superficial questions that generate superficial responses. How was your weekend? Fine. How's work going? Okay. These exchanges provide no real connection or useful information. Powerful questions probe deeper layers of experience, motivation, and meaning. Instead of asking someone about their job, ask what aspects of their work energize them most. Instead of asking about their weekend, ask what they did that felt most satisfying or meaningful. These questions invite people to share more interesting and authentic parts of their experience. They demonstrate genuine curiosity rather than social obligation. The best conversationalists use progressive deepening. Each question builds on the previous response to explore topics more thoroughly. If someone mentions they enjoyed a particular project at work, ask what made that project especially engaging. If they mention the collaborative aspect, explore what makes collaboration work well for them. This approach demonstrates genuine interest while helping people articulate thoughts and feelings they might not have previously examined. When you help someone understand their own motivations and preferences more clearly, you provide real value that makes them want to continue the conversation. Strategic listening, beyond the words. Pay attention not just to what people say, but how they say it and what they don't say. The topics someone discusses enthusiastically reveal their passions and values. The subjects they avoid or dismiss quickly indicate areas of discomfort or disinterest. The emotions that appear when discussing different topics show what matters most to them. Watch for energy shifts during conversation. When does someone lean forward versus pull back? When does their voice become more animated versus flat? These signals tell you which topics engage them and which ones to explore more deeply versus which to move past. Calibrating to communication preferences. Some people prefer detailed explanations while others want concise summaries. Some enjoy philosophical discussions while others focus on practical applications. Some need time to process ideas silently while others think out loud through dialogue. Recognizing these preferences requires observing how people respond to different types of input. When you share a detailed explanation, do they engage enthusiastically or seem overwhelmed? When you ask about abstract concepts, do they light up or redirect toward concrete examples? Adjusting your approach based on these responses creates much more satisfying interactions for both participants. You're speaking their language instead of requiring them to translate yours. The rhythm and flow of engagement. Good conversations have natural ebb and flow, periods of intense engagement alternating with quieter reflection. They include pauses that allow ideas to settle and moments of levity that maintain emotional balance. Managing conversational flow requires reading energy levels and adjusting accordingly. When someone seems mentally fatigued, shifting to lighter topics or creating natural ending points shows consideration and social awareness. When energy is high and engagement is strong, diving deeper into meaningful topics maximizes the opportunity for connection. Storytelling as connection tool stories engage emotions, create shared experiences, and make abstract concepts concrete and memorable. People remember stories long after they forget facts or arguments. They feel connected to storytellers who share meaningful experiences authentically. Effective storytelling requires structure, relevance, and emotional resonance. Good stories have clear beginnings, middles, and ends. They include enough detail to create vivid mental images without becoming tedious. They connect to themes or topics that matter to the listener and reveal something meaningful about the storyteller. The most powerful stories demonstrate vulnerability, growth, or learning. When you share how you overcame a challenge, learned from a mistake, or discovered something important about yourself, you invite others to share their own meaningful experiences. Building agreement strategically. Instead of trying to convince people through argument, find areas of natural agreement and build from there. Identify shared values, common goals, or mutual interests, and use these as foundations for exploring areas where perspectives might initially differ. This approach works because people are much more receptive to new ideas when they feel understood and respected. When you demonstrate genuine comprehension of their perspective before sharing your own, they're more likely to consider your viewpoint fairly. Handling disagreement with grace. When someone disagrees with you, Get curious about the disagreement rather than defensive. Ask questions to understand their reasoning. Look for valid points within different perspectives. This doesn't mean abandoning your convictions or agreeing with everything others say. It means creating space for different viewpoints to coexist and finding ways to bridge differences constructively. Often, apparent disagreements dissolve when people understand each other's underlying concerns and motivations. The person who opposes your proposal might actually share your goals, but have different concerns about implementation. When you address those concerns directly, the opposition often transforms into collaboration. Graceful exits and transitions. The conclusion of conversations affects how people remember the entire interaction. End conversations positively by acknowledging what you appreciated about the exchange, summarizing key insights or agreements, and creating clear next steps if appropriate. Know how to end conversations gracefully when they run their natural course. Don't let good conversations drag on until they become awkward or forced. Recognize when meaningful exchange has occurred and create elegant transitions to closure. Mastering these conversational elements transforms you from someone who hopes interactions go well into someone who actively shapes dialogue toward positive outcomes. You become known as someone who's genuinely interesting to talk with, not because you're entertaining, but because conversations with you leave people feeling heard, understood, and energized. Chapter 8. Conflict Resolution and Difficult Conversations. Transforming Tension into Trust. Most people would rather walk barefoot across broken glass than have a difficult conversation. They avoid, deflect, hint around issues, and hope problems will magically resolve themselves. And you know what? Sometimes they do. Minor irritations fade, small misunderstandings clear up naturally, temporary frustrations pass. But important conflicts, the ones that actually matter to your relationships, career, and personal well-being, never disappear on their own. They fester, they spread, they eventually explode in ways that damage relationships and outcomes far more than early, honest intervention ever would have. The fear of conflict stems from a fundamental misunderstanding. Most people equate conflict with fighting, aggression, and emotional damage. They've witnessed destructive arguments or experienced painful confrontations, and they've concluded that all disagreement is dangerous. But productive conflict is nothing like destructive fighting. Productive conflict focuses on solving problems and strengthening relationships. It addresses specific behaviors and situations rather than attacking character or personality. It seeks understanding and resolution rather than victory and domination. When handled skillfully, conflict actually strengthens relationships by clearing the air, establishing healthier boundaries, and creating deeper mutual understanding. The couples who never fight aren't the strongest. They're usually the ones who've built up so much unresolved resentment that they've stopped trying. The strongest relationships have learned to fight well. Separating person from problem. The foundation of effective conflict resolution is this simple principle: attack the problem, not the person. When someone's behavior creates difficulties, the issue is the behavior, not their fundamental worth as a human being. This distinction allows you to address problems directly while maintaining respect and care for the individual involved. When you interrupt me during meetings, I feel disrespected and unable to contribute effectively is completely different from "you're a rude, inconsiderate person." One statement addresses a specific, changeable behavior. The other attacks identity and character, triggering defensive reactions that make resolution impossible. Frame conflicts as shared problems to solve together, rather than battles to win. Instead of positioning yourself against the other person, position both of you against the problem. We're having communication difficulties that are affecting our collaboration. How can we work together to improve this? Creates partnership instead of opposition. Timing, the hidden variable. Attempting to resolve conflicts when people are emotionally activated, exhausted, or distracted rarely produces good results. The best time for difficult conversations is when all parties are calm, focused, and have adequate time to work through issues thoroughly. If someone approaches you for a difficult conversation when you're already stressed or pressed for time, it's completely appropriate to say, "This conversation is important to me, and I want to give it the attention it deserves. Can we schedule a time tomorrow when we're both fresh and have at least an hour available?" This isn't avoidance, it's wisdom. You're acknowledging the importance of the issue while ensuring conditions that make productive resolution more likely. Creating the right environment. Where you have difficult conversations matters. Private spaces reduce the risk of embarrassment and allow for more honest communication. Comfortable settings that don't create power imbalances help people feel more relaxed and open. Having a difficult conversation in someone's office where they sit behind a desk while you sit in a lower chair creates psychological hierarchy that makes equal dialogue harder. Meeting in a neutral space with equivalent seating positions the conversation as a partnership. Opening with care. How you start difficult conversations sets the tone for everything that follows. Beginning with acknowledgement of the relationship's value and expressing genuine intention to solve problems together creates collaborative foundation. I really value our working relationship, and I want to address something that's been creating tension between us. I'm hoping we can work this out together is vastly more effective than "we need to talk about your behavior." Avoid blame, accusations, or inflammatory language. Lead with your experience and intentions rather than with judgments about the other person's character or motivations. Positions versus interests. The key distinction. In any conflict, people take positions, what they say they want. But underneath those positions lie interests, why they want it. Two people might take completely opposing positions about a specific solution while sharing underlying interests in fairness, respect, or effectiveness. Focusing on interests rather than positions opens up creative solutions that satisfy everyone's core needs. When you understand why someone wants something, you can often find alternative ways to meet their needs while also addressing your own concerns. Ask, "Help me understand what's most important to you about this. What are you hoping to achieve? What concerns you most about the alternatives?" These questions shift the conversation from positional bargaining to collaborative problem solving. The power of listening. During conflict, people need to feel heard and understood before they can consider changing their positions. This doesn't mean agreeing with everything someone says, but it means demonstrating that you comprehend their perspective and acknowledge their concerns as legitimate. Reflect back what you hear. So, if I'm understanding correctly, you're concerned that this approach might compromise quality. Is that right? This serves multiple purposes. It shows you're paying attention. It gives the other person a chance to correct misunderstandings. And it often helps them clarify their own thinking. Sometimes people discover that their initial position isn't actually what they most care about once they articulate their underlying interests more clearly. Managing your own emotions. Strong emotions during conflict are normal and useful. They provide important information about violated values, threatened needs, or disappointed expectations. But emotions need to be managed appropriately, not suppressed or unleashed destructively. When you feel anger rising, recognize it as a signal that something important to you is being threatened. Use that information, but don't let the emotion control your response. Take a breath. Lower your voice intentionally. Slow your pace. If emotions become too intense for productive conversation, it's better to take a break. I'm feeling too activated to have this conversation productively right now. Can we continue this tomorrow morning when I've had time to process? The art of genuine apology. Real apologies, the kind that actually repair relationships, have 4 components. Acknowledge the specific harm caused, take responsibility without making excuses, express authentic remorse, commit to different behavior in the future. I'm sorry you feel that way is not an apology, it's a dismissal. I'm sorry I interrupted you during the presentation. That was disrespectful and undermined your credibility. I feel terrible about it, and I'll make sure to give you uninterrupted time to present in our next meeting. Actually repairs harm, but only apologize for things you're genuinely responsible for. Apologizing for things you didn't do or aren't responsible for weakens your credibility and enables inappropriate behavior from others. Finding common ground even in heated disagreements, people often care about similar things. Fairness, respect, effectiveness, security. Identifying these shared values creates foundation for collaborative problem solving. I think we both want our team to succeed, and we both care about maintaining good working relationships. Let's figure out how to address this issue in a way that serves both of those values. Generating creative solutions. Move beyond either-or, thinking toward creative alternatives that address everyone's core needs. Brainstorm multiple options before evaluating any of them. This prevents premature commitment to suboptimal solutions. The best resolutions often combine elements from different approaches in ways that weren't obvious initially. What if we tried your approach for the first phase and then evaluated whether to adjust based on the results? Creating specific agreements. Vague agreements like "we'll communicate better" rarely produce lasting change. Specific commitments create clear expectations and accountability structures. I'll send you a summary of any decisions made in meetings you can't attend, and you'll let me know within 24 hours if you have concerns about any of those decisions. Is concrete and measurable. Following through the follow-up phase often determines whether agreements actually produce lasting change. Schedule specific times to evaluate progress, adjust agreements if necessary, and address new issues before they escalate. Mastering difficult conversations requires recognizing that temporary discomfort during honest dialogue prevents much greater pain from unresolved problems. When you develop skill and confidence in addressing conflicts directly and compassionately, you become someone others trust to handle challenging situations constructively, and that trust becomes one of your most valuable assets. Chapter 9. Social Positioning and Reputation Management, Creating Your Strategic Social Identity. Your reputation walks into every room before you do. It influences how others perceive your ideas, trust your judgment, and respond to your requests. And here's what most people don't understand. Reputation isn't just about what you do. It's about how what you do gets perceived, interpreted, and communicated by others. Most people leave reputation to chance. They work hard, treat people decently, and hope positive perceptions will develop naturally. Sometimes this works, often it doesn't, because perception isn't always fair or accurate. Quality work done in obscurity creates no reputational benefit. Genuine expertise that nobody knows about provides no strategic advantage. Strategic reputation management involves deliberately shaping how others think about your character, competence, and value. This isn't about creating false images or manipulating perceptions dishonestly. It's about ensuring that your genuine strengths, values, and contributions get recognized and remembered accurately. Consistency, the foundation of trust. Strong reputations are built on consistent behavior that demonstrates your core values in action. When your actions consistently align with your stated principles, people learn to predict and trust your responses to different situations. If you say you value integrity, but make exceptions when it's convenient, people notice the gap. If you claim to prioritize collaboration, but consistently take individual credit, your stated values become meaningless. But when people observe you making difficult choices that honor your principles, even at personal cost, they develop genuine confidence in your character. Consistency doesn't mean rigidity. It means having recognizable patterns that others can rely on. Context, appropriate presentation. Different audiences value different qualities. In professional settings, competence, reliability, and strategic thinking might be most important. In social contexts, warmth, humor, and supportiveness might carry more weight. In leadership situations, vision, decisiveness, and integrity often matter most. The key isn't becoming a different person for different audiences. It's emphasizing different aspects of your authentic self based on what each situation requires. Your core character remains consistent while your presentation adapts to context. Visibility, making your value apparent. Even exceptional work has limited reputational impact if it happens invisibly. Strategic positioning requires finding appropriate ways to showcase your contributions, insights, and value without coming across as arrogant or self-promotional. This might mean speaking up in meetings when you have valuable insights to share, volunteering for projects that have visibility with important stakeholders, sharing successes in ways that feel natural rather than boastful. The goal is ensuring your best work gets seen by the right people at the right times. Association management. People judge you partly based on who you choose to spend time with and align yourself with. Being consistently associated with respected, successful, principled people enhances your reputation through proximity. Regular association with people known for poor judgment, unreliability, or questionable ethics can damage your standing even if you personally maintain high standards. This doesn't mean being superficial in relationships or abandoning friends during difficult times. It means being thoughtful about professional associations and understanding how different relationships might affect others' perceptions of your judgment. Building expertise, authority. People naturally defer to those who demonstrably know more about relevant topics. Becoming genuinely expert in areas that matter to your goals establishes you as a valuable resource and trusted authority. Building expertise requires continuous learning, staying current with developments, and finding appropriate ways to share your knowledge. Writing articles, giving presentations, participating in expert discussions, or simply being the person others turn to for insights, all contribute to expertise-based reputation. Communication style as reputation signal. How you express ideas affects how others perceive your intelligence, competence, and leadership potential just as much as what you actually say. Clear, confident communication enhances reputation, while unclear, hesitant, or aggressive communication undermines it. Develop authoritative communication by eliminating hedging language that weakens your statements. Instead of, "I think maybe we might want to possibly consider this approach," say, "I recommend this approach because it addresses our main challenges effectively." But balance authority with appropriate humility. The goal is confident expression of well-considered views, not arrogant dismissal of alternative perspectives. Crisis as character reveal. How you handle difficult situations often defines how others perceive your character and capabilities more than years of routine performance. People forget many ordinary interactions, but they remember how you responded during pressure, conflict, or failure. Effective crisis management requires taking appropriate responsibility without excessive self-blame, focusing on solutions rather than problems, and maintaining calm professionalism under stress. When you handle crises well, you actually strengthen your reputation because people see evidence of your character under pressure. Reputation maintenance. Protecting positive reputation you've built requires consistent behavior, careful attention to how actions might be perceived, and quick correction of any misunderstanding that could damage your standing. Think of reputation like a savings account. Every positive interaction, successful project, and demonstration of good character makes deposits. Every mistake, conflict, or disappointing outcome makes withdrawals. Maintaining positive balance requires consistently making more deposits than withdrawals. Reputation as opportunity creator. Strong reputation creates competitive advantage that opens doors, generates partnerships, and creates support for your initiatives. When you're known for specific strengths and qualities, people naturally think of you for relevant opportunities. The person known for solving complex problems gets called when challenging situations arise. The person known for bringing people together gets invited to facilitate important discussions. The person known for following through reliably gets trusted with crucial responsibilities. Helping others build reputation. Strategic reputation building also involves supporting others' development and success. When you consistently celebrate others' achievements, help them overcome challenges, and contribute to their growth, you become associated with positive outcomes and generous character. This creates networks of people invested in your success because you've been invested in theirs, and those networks become some of your most valuable assets over time. Chapter 10: Group Dynamics and Social Leadership Influencing Collective Behavior. Understanding how groups work represents the difference between being swept along by collective behavior and strategically influencing group outcomes. Groups don't operate like collections of individuals. They develop their own psychological dynamics that transform how people think, feel, and behave. Someone who's naturally collaborative in one-on-one interactions might become competitive in groups that reward individual achievement. A person who's thoughtful and measured alone might become reactive in groups experiencing high emotional intensity. Understanding these dynamics allows you to recognize which forces are shaping behavior and how to influence them effectively. Group culture, the invisible rule system. Every group develops its own culture, implicit rules and behavioral norms that powerfully shape individual behavior within the group. These cultural elements often operate below conscious awareness, yet they determine what behaviors get rewarded, punished, or ignored. In some groups, interrupting is normalized and expected. In others, it's considered deeply disrespectful. In some cultures, direct disagreement is valued as engagement. In others, it's seen as aggressive. People who would never interrupt in one-on-one conversation might do so constantly in groups where that's the norm. Understanding these cultural dynamics allows you to recognize which behaviors will be effective in specific groups and adjust your approach accordingly. More importantly, it enables you to influence the development of group culture in directions that serve everyone better. Social leadership without authority. You don't need formal positions or designated authority to exercise social leadership. It emerges from understanding group needs and consistently providing value that helps the group achieve its objectives. Social leaders become influential because they solve problems others can't solve, facilitate collaboration. Others can't create and provide direction when groups feel uncertain or fragmented. They're the ones people naturally turn to when challenges arise, not because of their titles, but because of proven capability. Reading Group Energy and Emotional States groups, like individuals, have moods that shift based on recent events, external pressures, and internal dynamics. Sometimes groups feel energized and optimistic. Other times they feel frustrated, discouraged, or fragmented. Effective social leaders calibrate their approach to match group emotional states. When a group feels overwhelmed, providing clarity and breaking complex challenges into manageable steps helps restore confidence. When energy is low, identifying quick wins or celebrating recent successes can restore momentum. Communication patterns as power maps. Observe who speaks first in discussions, who gets interrupted, whose ideas get developed, and whose suggestions get ignored. These patterns reveal power structures, influence, relationships, and decision-making processes more accurately than any organizational chart. Strategic communicators position themselves effectively within these patterns. They speak at moments when contributions will have maximum impact. They build on ideas that have already gained traction. They support worthwhile suggestions from others to build alliance relationships. Coalition building for shared goals. Building coalitions requires identifying natural allies who share your objectives and working together to create broader support. This isn't manipulation. It's finding genuine alignment and collaborating toward shared goals. In voting-based decision systems, building majority support requires understanding what motivates different members and addressing their concerns. In consensus-based systems, finding solutions that address everyone's core needs becomes crucial. Facilitating productive group process. The role of facilitator represents one of the most powerful forms of social leadership because facilitators shape how groups process information, make decisions, and interact with each other. Good facilitation helps groups achieve better outcomes while creating positive experiences for participants. This includes managing speaking opportunities fairly, keeping discussions focused on relevant topics, summarizing key points to ensure understanding, and helping groups reach closure on decisions. These facilitation skills make you valuable to any group and naturally position you for leadership roles, because groups that function well create better outcomes for everyone involved. Innovation and change in group contexts. Groups tend to resist changes that threaten established relationships, disrupt comfortable routines, or create uncertainty about outcomes. Overcoming resistance requires demonstrating clear benefits, addressing legitimate concerns, and implementing changes gradually when possible. The most effective change agents build credibility through consistent value provision first. Then they identify early adopters who are naturally open to new approaches. Then they create small successes that demonstrate value of proposed changes. This progression makes broader adoption far more likely than trying to force change through authority or argument alone. Sustaining group motivation. Groups become motivated when they have clear shared goals, believe their efforts will make a difference, and feel supported in their work. Creating these conditions becomes a primary responsibility of social leaders. Recognition and celebration play crucial roles in maintaining motivation. Acknowledging individual contributions publicly, celebrating group achievements, and connecting current efforts to larger purposes helps sustain energy and commitment over time. Developing distributed leadership. The highest level of group leadership involves developing other leaders rather than centralizing all influence in yourself. Empowering others to take initiative, make decisions, and contribute their unique strengths create stronger, more resilient groups. This approach requires confidence in your own value and genuine commitment to group success over personal recognition. When you consistently help others develop their capabilities, you become associated with group effectiveness and naturally maintain influential positioning, because everyone recognizes that the group functions better because of your contributions. Mastering group dynamics transforms you from someone who hopes groups will function well into someone who actively shapes group culture, facilitates effective collaboration, and influences collective outcomes. Skills that become increasingly valuable as your responsibilities grow. Chapter 11. Advanced Persuasion Psychology. The Science of Ethical Influence. Most people approach persuasion through trial and error. using techniques they've seen others use without understanding why certain approaches work. This creates inconsistent results and often generates resistance rather than genuine agreement. Master persuaders operate from a completely different framework. They understand that people don't make decisions rationally, even when they believe they do. Neuroscience research reveals that emotions drive decisions while logic provides after-the-fact justification for choices already made subconsciously. This means effective persuasion must engage emotions first, then provide logical support for emotionally driven conclusions. When you understand what people truly care about beneath their surface statements, you can address those deeper concerns directly. The power of cognitive dissonance. People resist changing their minds even when presented with compelling evidence that contradicts existing beliefs. When new information conflicts with established positions, they experience psychological discomfort that they typically resolve by rejecting the new information. Advanced persuaders work with this reality rather than against it. Instead of directly contradicting existing beliefs, they help people discover inconsistencies within their own thinking through carefully crafted questions. This self-persuasion creates much stronger commitment than externally imposed arguments. Mental models and framework alignment. Everyone interprets new information through existing mental frameworks. When your message aligns with someone's existing models, they accept it easily. When it conflicts, they resist automatically. Effective persuasion requires either working within existing frameworks or gradually expanding them through analogies that connect unfamiliar concepts to familiar experiences. Show people how others similar to them have successfully adopted new approaches, and resistance often melts away. Strategic timing and receptivity. People are more receptive to new ideas when experiencing dissatisfaction with current situations, facing deadlines that require decisions, or encountering opportunities aligned with their goals. Attempting persuasion when people feel comfortable with the status quo rarely produces results. The art is recognizing optimal timing and positioning your influence when people are naturally open to change. Chapter 12. Network Building and Strategic Relationship Management. Creating your circle of influence. Your network determines the opportunities you encounter, the resources you can access, and the influence you can exercise. But most people approach networking passively, hoping good relationships develop naturally. Strategic network building requires intentional effort to create connections, providing mutual benefit over time. This isn't about collecting contacts. It's about developing relationships where you regularly provide value and receive value in return. Value exchange as foundation. Valuable relationships are built on consistent value exchange. Identify what each person needs most and look for ways to help them achieve their goals. Make strategic introductions. Share relevant information. Offer support during challenges. Provide thoughtful perspective on problems they're facing. When you consistently help others succeed, they naturally become invested in your success as well. This creates sustainable networks based on genuine mutual interest rather than superficial obligation. Network diversity creates opportunity. Homogeneous networks, while comfortable, limit available opportunities and insights. Diverse networks provide access to broader information, different problem-solving approaches, and more varied opportunities. Build relationships intentionally with people who differ from you in age, cultural background, industry experience, expertise areas, and life experiences. This isn't about collecting diverse people like trophies. It's genuinely valuing different perspectives and actively learning from those whose experiences differ from yours. Digital and physical integration. Use digital tools to enhance rather than replace personal interaction. Digital connection without meaningful engagement creates the illusion of networking without its substance. The goal is using technology to facilitate genuine relationships, maintaining contact with larger numbers of people while ensuring interactions remain personal and valuable. Chapter 13. Micro-expressions and body language mastery. Reading the hidden signals. Human communication operates simultaneously on verbal and nonverbal channels, with nonverbal signals often providing more accurate information about true thoughts and feelings than spoken words. Learning to read these signals accurately provides significant advantage in all interactions. You can detect when someone agrees verbally but has unstated concerns. You can recognize when apparent cooperation masks underlying resistance. This information allows you to adjust your approach in real time. Facial expressions as emotional windows. The face contains over 40 muscles dedicated to expression, responding automatically to emotional states. While people can control words fairly easily, controlling every facial muscle simultaneously requires enormous conscious effort most can't sustain. Genuine happiness engages both mouth and eye muscles, creating what researchers call authentic smiles. Social smiles only engage the mouth, leaving eyes unchanged. Once you distinguish between these, you'll never mistake polite tolerance for genuine enthusiasm. Reading baseline behavior. Everyone has natural patterns representing their normal state. What matters isn't absolute signal levels, it's deviation from each person's baseline. A naturally expressive person might display what looks like anger when only mildly annoyed. A reserved person might look calm while experiencing intense distress. Establish baseline by observing people during neutral situations before interpreting behavior during important interactions. This gives you reference points for recognizing when nonverbal communication changes in response to specific topics. Chapter 14. Digital Age, Social Intelligence, Navigating Virtual Relationships and Online Influence. The digital revolution has transformed social interaction, creating new opportunities while introducing unprecedented challenges for building authentic relationships and exercising ethical influence. Digital communication removes many nonverbal cues, providing crucial information in face-to-face interactions. Without facial expressions, body language, and vocal tone, misunderstandings become more common. Relationships require different approaches to develop trust and connection. Building digital relationships with depth, text-based communication relies heavily on word choice, timing, and context to convey emotional information immediately apparent in person. Learning to communicate clearly and completely in digital formats requires different skills than verbal conversation. Quality of digital relationships depends more on consistency and authenticity than frequency. Regular, genuine interactions create stronger connections than sporadic bursts of activity. Digital influence Through value creation, online influence operates through different mechanisms than in-person influence because trust develops through accumulated digital interactions rather than physical presence. Digital influence builders must demonstrate expertise, consistency, and genuine value provision over extended periods. Content creation becomes a primary vehicle for digital influence because valuable content attracts attention, demonstrates expertise, and provides opportunities for meaningful interaction. Chapter 15: Integration and Mastery. Building your emotional intelligence operating system. Developing social intelligence isn't about learning isolated techniques applied in specific situations. True mastery comes from integrating all these skills into a coherent personal operating system, guiding how you approach every social interaction. Self-awareness as foundation. The foundation of integration is self-awareness extending beyond recognizing emotions to understanding your patterns, triggers, and default responses in different situations. This meta-awareness allows you to notice when you're falling into unproductive patterns and consciously choose more effective approaches. After important interactions, spend time analyzing what went well and what could improve. Notice patterns in your reactions to different types of people or situations. Identify circumstances bringing out your best social performance and those triggering your least effective responses. Values alignment for ethical application. Your enhanced ability to read others, influence outcomes, and manage relationships must align with genuine care for others' well-being and commitment to mutual benefit. Without this ethical foundation, social skills become tools for exploitation rather than instruments for positive impact. Clarify what you actually care about beyond social success. What kind of impact do you want to have? What type of relationships do you want to build? How do you want to be remembered? Adaptive expertise across contexts. Different situations require different aspects of social intelligence. Crisis situations might need emotional regulation and clear communication. Creative collaborations might need rapport building and conflict resolution. Leadership opportunities might demand strategic influence and group dynamics management. Develop competence across all areas while maintaining flexibility to emphasize different skills as circumstances require. Continuous growth and a practice. Social intelligence is an evolving field with new insights emerging regularly. Stay current with research while learning from ongoing experiences with different people and situations. The most valuable learning often comes from relationships with people who model excellent social intelligence and from challenging situations forcing you to develop new capabilities. Integration into identity. When social competence becomes integrated into your identity, you stop consciously trying to use techniques and start naturally operating from genuine care, effective communication, and ethical influence. This integration takes time and requires consistent practice across many situations. The goal isn't perfection. It's developing enough competence and confidence to handle whatever social challenges arise. The ultimate measure. The ultimate measure of social intelligence mastery isn't how well you manipulate others or how popular you become. It's how effectively you build meaningful relationships, contribute positively to group dynamics, resolve conflicts constructively, and help others feel understood and valued. When you can consistently create positive outcomes for yourself and others through skillful social interaction, you've achieved genuine mastery. Your journey toward social intelligence is unique because it builds on your individual strengths, addresses your specific challenges, and serves your particular goals and values. The frameworks in this audiobook provide structure for development, but actual growth happens through commitment to continuous learning, ethical application, and genuine care for people you interact with every day. Remember, social intelligence isn't about becoming someone different. It's about becoming the most effective, authentic, and positively impactful version of yourself in relationship with others. This journey enriches not only your own life, but also the lives of everyone who has the privilege of meaningful interaction with you. You're not shy. You never were. You were simply operating without the knowledge, frameworks, and skills that transform social uncertainty into social mastery. Now you have them. The only question remaining is what you'll do with this power. Go create the connections, influence, and impact you've always known you were capable of.